Okay, for my school, I go to Reynolds, and I would say it's around a 6.
I would rate the racism in school systems a 6. Being a dark-skinned female in general is just overall hard, and we do not get what the dark-skinned guys get praised because they're looked at as better, but they see any dark-skinned girl as nappy, ghetto, and just, yeah.
So I would rate racism in this school, like currently right now, I'd say a good 3. Like I feel like racism, like in middle school now that we're older, like we kind of know better. So then, when I call someone out being like, hey, that's like what you're saying is not okay, they do listen and like not do it again. And there's more accountability in middle school. I would definitely say a solid 9.
I would rate my experiences with racism at Vic High at like around a 6, because personally I haven't felt like it was like too much or too bad, but I've seen like my other black friends experience it like worse than me, so I'd say around a 6.
On this scale in racism in this school, I would view it as 5 to 6.
So I go to Mount Doug, and on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate the racism in my school probably like an 8.
Okay, there was once in the 7th grade where we were obviously reading like as a class, like together, reading a book about like racism and like the olden days and stuff. And then usually like teachers, when there's like obviously the N-word or like a slur in it, like they'll usually like ask students or like the student who like it implies to if they're okay with them saying it. But somehow my teacher just went straight on and just said it, and then I felt really awkward because the whole class, I was the only black kid in the class because I was the only black kid. It was a private school and I was the only black kid in the school. So all the students were just looking at me, and like after the class they were asking me like, oh, how do you feel, like that, wow, that was wrong. And like I was just like really, I felt kind of weird about it. Yeah.
In school, I have experienced racism as in a class I have been called a hood rat because I was not able to do a dance, and it was frustrating me too much to the point where I had to take a little break.
A time I felt racism from teachers and educators would be kind of like a similar one currently, as like just a sub came in, and she's come in a couple of times in my classroom, so she does know all us, she's familiar with us. To just mindful, I am the only black kid in the class currently, so but today she wrote on the attendance sheet that I was African Canadian, and it's not like, I'm not going to call her racist, but it's just one of those things that it's just like, why feel the need to even note that? I'm the only black kid in the class, like there's not like much of a difference to like, oh, like what if I forget, like I'm literally the only one, you'll know if I'm not there or if I'm here. But like another time which really stuck to me was like these white kids in my middle school would always come up to me at lunch or when I'm doing my homework and like harass me to say the N-word, and I just had enough. I was like, I'm not gonna say it, it's my personal preference. So I went up to my grade 7 teacher. I told him I really hate that they keep trying to tell me to say the N-word and give them the N-word pass and say that they're black when they're clearly white. And he's just like, no, they're just boys, like, they like to tease girls. I'm like, it's only me they're teasing. Like, my friends are all girls, and they're not saying anything to them. I'm the only black girl, and they keep harassing me. He's like, oh, they'll just grow out of it, like, just give them a few days. I'm like, no, I need you to talk to them now, because it's been months. Like, this is annoying. I want it over with. And then he goes, no, like, I can't do that because, like, they're just silly. You know how those guys are. And then he proceeded the next desk change to sit me right next to this kid. And then after a couple days, like, I'm just not talking to the kid because, like, why should I feel the need to? And then he comes up to me, the teacher, and he goes, Brett thinks that you hate him and, like, you keep saying things to him. I'm like, I haven't said anything to him. I don't hate him. I'm just a bit annoyed that you purposely put him right next to me after I told you that he's, like, really racist and just saying a bunch of things and harassing me. Goes, well, maybe you should just try to like be a little more happy and just try to seem more approachable. And I'm like, I don't know how more approachable I can be. Like, they're coming up to me, I'm not going up to them. So I'd say that kind of sums up one experience that I've had in middle school and in high school.
I mean, I have a couple stories about just like my experiences. Like one, I was in an honors science class at Vic High, and I walked in and and I sat down, and they were like, he doubted that I was supposed to be in the class. Like, he thought I was supposed to be in a different, like, easier class, so I didn't feel like too good. And another one, sometimes like I was with my friends and we got in a bit of trouble, and I felt like I got in way more trouble, like, and the trouble was like disproportionate to what I actually did. So that's what I would say.
So like anyone who knows me knows like I have a lot of stories, a lot of experiences with teachers and like staff from my school. But like to name a few, I would say, well, once we were just kind of put into groups to plan for like our school pep rally, and it was just there was just like five other students in my group, and we were just like in a private room trying to discuss details, but I felt like kind of excluded from what they were like doing. So I and this friend of mine just decided to leave my phone recording and walked out of the room to see what they had to say, because like, you know, like out of curiosity I was like, why do they not like me or whatever. And so yeah, I came back 2 minutes later, grabbed my phone, and it was like a lot of stuff was said as I imagined, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I just went to the teacher and I was like, hey, like, can I switch groups? Is there any other group that would that could use an extra person? And so she's like, why is that? And I'm like, I just like I explained that like I left my phone recording, and they weren't really saying nice stuff about me, and they weren't like fans of me and stuff. And she was like, well, like, you shouldn't have done that, now you have something against them. And I'm like, okay, like that's not the whole point, I didn't say that. But and then she's like, well, why do you think they don't like you? And before I could even answer, she's like, I just want to say, don't like assume, like, do you think it's because of your skin color or anything? Because that's not always the case, you know, like you can't always assume that people don't like you because of your skin color. And I was like I didn't even say that at all. Like I didn't like say anything about race. Like I just said they didn't really have, like, they weren't fans of me, like they didn't have nice stuff to say about me. And she goes, well, have you like ever experienced racism in the school? Because I just can't imagine like anyone being racist. Like she also asks in a like a few seconds later, like she's like, what is a sand nigger, like word for word. And I was like, it was out of the blue, but I think she mentioned it because like in class that day someone was talking about like this teacher who always like, you know, calls like black students in the school the sand n-word, and just like, you know, like, yeah. And with this specific teacher, it's not like this incident was the first time. Like I walk into class and she always like touches my hair, and like not even touches it, like she throws it around like it's garbage or like some like whatever. And she's like, she always like has comments to say like, oh my god, is this your real hair? That can't be. And then just with other teachers, like sometimes it's like small or like specific comments, like black people can't grow long hair, like there's no way like they can grow long hair, like there's no way that's real.
Okay, I'd say from students, I just really experience stereotypes. Like obviously, since I'm black, like people think, oh, I'm faster, or I'm like more athletic, or I'm like a thug or something. But I feel like that is like not really who I really am, and like I kind of feel like the stereotypes need to end. Like obviously, like I guess I am fast, but like I used to be, when I was in the 4th grade, I used to be one of the fastest kids in like Victoria. And all the kids would just be like, oh, it's because you're black, it's in your genetics. And they'd always be like saying that it's just because I'm black that I'm fast, and not because I've like worked for it, you know?
While I was walking in the halls in my socks and shorts, I overheard people saying that she could be so much better and have so much more potential with her body if she was just white.
Like a good example, the whole Ariel movie, the live action, like why is she black, like, you know. And I had a conversation with one of my coworkers about it, and he's just like, the whole movie's ruined. I'm like, what's ruined? Like it's just been a trailer out, like the ocean's wrong, like what's. But I feel like there's just a lack of understanding in middle school. One thing about me is I love my hair, I don't want it being touched. In middle school, there's this whole drastic thing, like all year kids were like, can we please touch your hair? I'm like, no, like I get it done, I do it myself, like I don't want you to touch it, it's hard work. And they're like, please, like I just want to touch it. And at the end of the year, my teacher's like, please, the whole class has been begging you. And it kind of, I did step back for a bit because I'm like, why is the teacher encouraging these kids to touch my hair after I've said no all year? And I gave in because of peer pressure. Like, everyone kind of like not circled me, but everyone was all looking at me and just like shifting their bodies. Like, there is a pressure to that. And so I gave in and I let them touch my hair. And I just felt very defeated that I just couldn't, like, I'm the only one standing up for myself. And I mean, I don't blame my friends because it's like, this is, again, it's like such a random thing to do. Like, they don't know how to move on with it, but just like an authority, an educator, just like, just let them, And I'm like, no, I've said no, don't want it to happen. Like, just acknowledge that, So I feel like there is a lack of acknowledgement and a lack of understanding in schools currently.
And something I've experienced would probably be just like jokes, but then when they're repeated so many times, sometimes it can just kind of get to you. So, like, for example, whenever we're in the mall or something like that at lunch and we see KFC, they're just like, hey, Vico, it's your favorite food or whatever. And this just doesn't feel great.
In this school, there is a bit of like jokes about slurs and just comments that actually have an issue today. And somebody who experienced daily struggles and you make a comment that's like, oh, I'm just kidding. Like, that's a bit like, almost like a judgment towards that person.
A time that I experienced racism within my peers at school was, this was because I'm in grade 12, so this was a grade 12 like grad group chat on Snapchat. And basically, well, it was during a time of like gotcha. Like, you're a grad, you probably know what gotcha is. It's just like this, game of tag, and so basically, my friend and I were always, this was just for jokes, where like the other students would put garbage on top of her car, that we're always usually in, and just once she drove off and the garbage was like all on the floor and stuff. So in the group chat they were like calling her out. Like, it wasn't serious. It was just like, hey, like, we're gonna report you to the cops. Like, da da da. You're not allowed to litter. It was just like mostly jokes. But then she wasn't like really responding. I think she was at work or something. So then they at me. They're like, hey, like, pick up, like, why can't you pick your girl's trash up? Like, it's this specific person first who was like, why can't you pick your girl's trash up? And I'm like, why would I? And they were like, weren't you ancestors slaves? Doesn't that make you one? So he calls me the N-word like multiple times after saying like, weren't my ancestors slaves? Doesn't that make me a slave? Which is why I should clean up her garbage or whatever.
I think that a lesson that all the teachers should learn from this is, if two people get in trouble, one's black, one's white, like, just give them both like 50-50 of the like punishment, and don't just make it like 75-25 to the black person or to the white person because you feel bad for the black person. Because we just all want to be treated equally, and we just want to like fit in and just be normal, be a normal kid.
I feel like, as being a dark-skinned girl with two separate learning disabilities, that is going to be way more harder than it is for someone being black and light-skinned to be able to get the proper help that they need, because as seen as a dark-skinned, they just assume being ghetto and just being hood.
To feel educated, for them to go up to the person and be like, is this okay for me to say? If it's too uncomfortable, maybe let me know what words I can use for what we're talking about. And to just really have a sense of comfort and supporting somebody in that class who, it's a very, very sensitive topic to that person maybe, and people are more sensitive than others about it.
One thing I would say to teachers is just don't make assumptions before you get to know someone. Like, just get to know them first before assuming they can like accomplish something or anything like that. And also, like, for some of the teachers who deny there's any racism at all, like, how would you know if you, like, it's not like the racism is happening to you, so it's like, it's hard for you to know what's actually going on.
So I'm part of this organization, Black Youth Empowerment, and what we do is we create workshops that we administer to teachers across the island, and it's just about like how like black students experiences, and how like the school's system, like like staff and students, and like how like just how everyone could kind of better themselves to just better themselves. But usually the people who turn up to our workshops are like teachers that obviously think like they're obviously teachers that probably don't even need to pull up. Yes, it's kind of like preaching to the choir, because obviously these teachers, like, they can recognize that this is a valid and like important like workshop, because it's very much like, you know, it's just kind of like the teachers that don't know about this or don't come to this, like, I feel like they're the ones we need to be reaching out most to. And I think hopefully this video is gonna reach them at some point, so they can kind of recognize and understand that like Black students do go through a lot in the school system, and so much, like, there's so much that needs to be changed, and starting with the way teachers act and what they do. And it's just, yeah.
Challenging, unheard, and isolated.
Shitty, negative, and dehumanizing.
Alone, self-reliant, and unacknowledged.
Lonely, cautious, and profiled.
Intimidating, frustrating, and cautious.
Singled out, targeted, and discriminated.
I would rate the racism at my school probably a 3 out of 10. I think a lot of it stems from the fact that people are unaware, but just because they're unaware doesn't mean that they shouldn't do the work.
So I'm Nicola. How would I rate racism? I think if I'm speaking from a student's perspective, growing up in Ontario, Canada, Toronto, I would say, because I went to a Catholic school predominantly white, the racism was about 7, between 7 and 8. And then when I think about schools in Victoria, obviously I'm not a student anymore, but I work with a lot of students in my private practice as a clinician. And I would say that would be around 8 as well, in terms of what they've reported to me. And I'm not a scholar in terms of statistics, but in terms of my interactions with the students, but also with their parents and through organizations, I would say it's about 8. So they're dealing with racism, if not directly, indirectly, from primarily school staff, aka teachers. So definitely an 8.
If it's covert racism, I would give it probably something about between 7 and 8. I think it's pretty high. I think people hide their racism very well, or they make suggestions like, oh, you're not thought of, or you're not. It's a saying that when something goes bad, then you're seen. But if you're looking for something that's good, then they don't see you. So that's where I would phrase that. The covert, the overt racism, I had the experience once. I was sitting at lunch. There was 3 of my colleagues at the table, and one of them made a remark referring to black men. I went, oh. And I said to the other, did you hear that? And there was 3 Caucasian people around the table and myself being the 4th person. And the two that heard it, it just fell on deaf ears. They totally dismissed what I was saying, meaning that they didn't even answer me or look at me in the face. The other one that I've witnessed was that, this was quite a few years ago. I was working in Indigenous class. I was watching a movie and about an Indigenous story. So they were watching it, and this Caucasian teacher comes in, looks up the screen, looks at the teacher and says, "Is that you?" I swear to God, yes, exactly. You'd be amazed the kind of things that you hear. And I just said, I was feeling so annoyed. I was, because I know, I said, "You're gonna say anything?" No, I was just gonna leave it. But lucky it wasn't me, because I'm not gonna say what I would have done. I'd be in trouble.
My experience as a, for the longest time, I was the only Black staff out of probably 50 teachers. So what I found was that, every February for Black History Month, eyes would turn towards me, expecting me to organize things. I ended up one year for Black History Month during COVID, just talking to staff about what they could do for Black History Month instead of coming to me. And I used my youngest daughter, I used her story. So what I told staff was that they just had to start small, just by having books with diverse characters, with Black characters or Black authors, having that in class and showing that to their students. I thought that was just so powerful, and it was something that was easy to do. And after the staff meeting, a lot of staff came up to me because they recognized that they didn't have diversity in books, and so that was just where everyone was able to start.
When I think about racism, racialized violence, that is people doing violence towards me because of my skin color in organizations. So I've worked with primarily nonprofits, and it's been brutal. So if I if I were thinking about the scale, it would be a 10, to the point where I was actually invited to leave one of my jobs because I pointed out the racialized violence, and I was demonstrating how it was impacting me um, mentally and physiologically. So there are different ways that violence impacts us, right? And not everyone who's confronted with racism will be affected, or we're affected in different ways. But at the time, or during the times that these incidents were directed at me in different organizations, I didn't have the tools to manage these violent encounters. And so I internalized the violence. I kept it inside. I believed what people said about me. Kind of like, it was my blackness that was causing the problem, or that were causing the problem, instead of the people, looking at the people as the problem, right? They were racist and they were doing violence towards me. If we look at schools, well, what are the policies, the anti-racism policies, to ensure that Black students and other students aren't discriminated against, or I don't know if we can stop it, but to hold those people accountable when they do this racism?
I mean, though, how much as I do, I mean, I say this now, I do love Victoria. I mean, not so much the people, just the way it is, just the trees. But I think, though it's a very predominantly white town or city, I know that I was brought up to realize that once I leave my front door, that I'm a Black male, and I have to put all my alerts on walking down the street constantly. Be careful what I say, be careful what I do. And you live with that heightened um, tension every single day of your life. You don't feel there's any time to kind of relax, because you're always constantly, and you're taught that, to be aware of where you are and what you say. And to come into here, I've had the conversations with one or two teachers, but I don't think people take that into account. And also, you're living with trauma as well. All Black people are living with trauma that live here. So I've said to them that, when you come in, right, it's easy for them because they can walk into a pub, they can walk to the theatre and not be conscious of who they are. As in Victoria, not that I am, but it's like that you're alert that you realize your surroundings, right? And not that no one's gonna come up, not in Victoria anyway, to say anything to you. And then people are pretty reasonable. But yeah, I mean, coming here, I mean, definitely, I don't think that's ever taken into account. I mean, you realize that once you're in a very white predominantly, people don't, no, it's not taken into account about where you are and who you are, because somehow when you come into this environment, especially like this, they think the level playing field is all equal. Like there's no, they don't even believe racism exists. And once you're in your workplace and there's something said, but yeah, you gotta be careful.
In terms of stories, I have a lot. So whether I'm working in organizations or I'm the one contracting white people and how they think they can use power, the people I'm contracting, how they believe they should use their power and privilege, and then I have to correct them. Or in organizations, which story do I want to tell? As I said earlier, I was invited to leave one organization and then I was fired from another one, a very dominant organization here in Victoria for no reason at all. I was just fired one day because I was really standing up for myself. Now, I've encountered racism. I've been called the N word a lot in Victoria from strangers, people I don't know. But I always say there's a cost to everything. So there's a price for something. This is one of the costs. I get to talk about these people. They know who they are, and I can hold them also accountable.
I think that maybe part of feeling overlooked was maybe something that I had to figure out through my own journey. I think sometimes just by being, basically, I was often the only Black student growing up in my classrooms. And I always had the message from my parents that, as a Black female, I had to work twice as hard and I had to do more than my peers. So I think that's probably a pressure that I put on myself just from, I know that my parents had a really good intention and they wanted me to be safe, but sometimes I think that pressure didn't allow me to be who I truly could be. And so I've, after just doing some reflection, I think that maybe when I was overlooked for things, maybe that was more an internal thing. But now I'm trying to just know who I am and I stand up for things more. I find that I have boundaries, and if I want to do something, I'll do it. If I don't, say no.
Okay. I don't get overlooked by the students. I think they're just fantastic. It's a job that I think that I'm gifted with. I truly believe that. And the students, I mean, like I've had last year that when they were graduating, I got acknowledgement from some of the students. I've had a student here. I've seen a couple of times that she was, I think that at the time they were interviewing grade 12, and she was asked about a staff member that's helped her along, and she started crying. She started crying, she had all tears, and some of the, asked Mr. Couture, because he'll tell you, tears was coming down her eyes and mentioning my name. And that's the kind of thing that I want to help everybody, regardless of color. But I do hold my people out though. But staff, I think for me, I think that's the thing they overlook. I think they don't want to see that. Because when you see, likes of maybe one or two of the boys, they come, they put their arms around, they're really but that's more to do culturally though, that hasn't, but they're kind of really friendly. And then, you may see me talking to someone, like kind of one-to-one, like they want to say, oh, can I talk to you? And if they have issues and stuff like they end up coming to, well, not that they come to me. And if I can help them, I will do. I'll come for my advice, or just want to say hi, how you doing? Even walking down the corridor, you know, any staff name that you're gonna hear, I think you're gonna hear mine before anybody else. Sorry, folks, I have to say that. You got, what's it they say? What's that saying they would say? You got big up, as we say in the Caribbean. Yeah, you got to big up yourself. Yes.
I think a lot of staff are very unaware. I think that because they haven't been in the shoes of a person of color, maybe they haven't even watched movies, or they haven't read books by people of color, I think that they are just unaware. I know my daughter had a hard time just being biracial, and kids wanting to touch her hair all the time and pull her hair. And my daughter needed somebody to help advocate and tell students not to do that. But I don't even think that the teachers saw that as a problem. As a result, my daughter does not like going to school, feels super self-conscious because she's different, or she looks different. And so my daughter doesn't feel safe at school. And I think a teacher's job is to help all kids feel safe. So I do think it's important for all teachers to go through mandatory anti-racism workshops, because they are so unaware. They don't know, it's not even on their radar. But a lot of students of color feel so different, feel unheard, feel like they don't have a voice. And I think it is absolutely 100% a teacher's job to understand what all their students are going through, or even have some sort of empathy towards it. And I think starting with a mandatory anti-racism workshop will just help teachers understand that. I firmly believe we've been talking about trauma-informed practice within education, but if teachers don't understand the trauma or causing many traumas to our students, we're not helping. So yeah.
Yeah. God, no, this would be so controversial. It would be, I think I would. Perhaps so. I think as well, I don't think they have any understanding of anti-racism. I don't think they have any understanding of their own white privilege or their fragility. So I think it would probably go amiss. Don't forget, so when you see some of these, well, when I see these teachers in here, they're just, it's everyday business for them. And you know how work politics go. Like everybody's trying to position themselves in a position so they can win whatever race they're entering in. It's interesting to see, like, you know, you could just see these people. So yeah, I don't think. I mean, like, you know, we had that anti-racism thing. You know that it's going one ear coming out the other. Why don't they have it in this school? Why don't they have it as a proper Pro D day and make sure all staff attend? They won't do that. I've seen it so many times. And then, if it's a mandatory attendance, if it was a voluntary attendance, you see how many people that just would not even bother to turn up. They're not interested. They give it all they give it all what they think you want to hear, and they play their part. But no.
Absolutely. Well, if we look at the word bystander, it's standing by, seeing some violence occurring, whether it's racialized violence, sexualized violence, you name it, and doing nothing about it. Do I believe this is occurring? Well, I don't believe, because that's not necessarily statistically based. The evidence shows, based on the stories I'm told, based on my work in Black community, based on my work with Black students here on Vancouver Island in Victoria, but even before I came to Victoria in Ontario, is clear that there's a lot of bystander interactions or lack thereof from teachers, school staff, not just teachers, but the administrative staff when it comes to racialized violence towards Black students. Absolutely, it's occurring. But also, some people don't see the value when they see violence being enacted towards Black students to do anything about it. But because I'm sure in the literature they do step in when it's from Black students to other students, any sort of violence, and Black students are very much highly likely to be expelled from school or some sort of punishment from schools. The research is there. So am I certain that there's bystander lack of intervention, interaction from teachers? Absolutely, no doubt about it. It's occurring, and the people who suffer are Black students, right? Because again, that silence, that lack of intervening suggests to Black students that they're not valuable, right? That they're not worth the attention, and they're not as invaluable as other students, right? Which creates this sense of insecurity, hopelessness, helplessness, and lack of motivation to be in school and to pursue their goals. So we're really teachers or school staff, when they don't do anything, they're really creating a kind of like a lack of future for Black students. Teachers really need to think about how they're engaging with Black students and their lack of engagement and the effect of that lack of engagement.
So a couple of years ago, I gave a talk at a staff meeting. I was the only Black teacher on staff to to an all-white staff. And the way I started it was that when I was a little girl, my mom got me a black Cabbage Patch doll, and I was so ungrateful. I didn't want that black Cabbage Patch doll because it didn't represent what I saw in TV and society. And then 30 years later, when I had my own kids, and I was super excited that there was a black Disney princess finally, my daughters were like, we don't want that. We want the Disney princess with the long blonde hair. And so for me, I'm recognizing that, you know, although things have changed, things are still the same in certain ways, in some ways. And so I think that it's, you know, what I realized was that like, it's hard for kids that identify as BIPOC. It's hard for them to fit in. It's hard for them to understand and know their identity because we are always told that we're not good enough. And so that's when I started to become really vocal for my daughters. I kind of want to do that. I want to stir things up. I want them to see that they matter, they're important. And I don't want them to struggle the way that I did. I want them to have a great balance in life. I want them to work hard, but also be happy.